Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Coven's Revenge by Mae Dawson. Narrated by Stephanie Rose and Chris Chambers. Chapter 1. Piper. The Coven is coming for me. No matter how much I tried to focus, that single, repetitive thought hummed through my brain. The man who had called himself my father was somehow still alive. He would never let me go. Even when my father had died, Callum had killed him once. He would always come back for me. He had taken my parents. He had torn away my pack and my childhood and innocence. And now he was the ghost who haunted me.
"We've got a boat incoming."
As Logan squinted, I followed his gaze to the white bow that had just broken the horizon. The two of us watched the sea from the widow's walk on the top of the rambling Victorian house that overlooked the water. From here, we guarded the far edge of the island, which was almost lost in the mists that swirled above the waves. The island looked as if it was cloaked in mystery. I bobbed onto my toes, as if I could see that much better with an extra inch of height. He raised binoculars to his eyes, and then he grinned as he turned to me.
"Look."
"What is it?" I demanded. Instead of replying, he held the binoculars against my face. For a second, all I saw was a blur. I shifted, bumping my nose against the hard plastic. A boat bounced up and down over the waves. I caught a glimpse of Arthur's face behind the steering wheel. Thank God. Arthur. And then, over his shoulder, was my sister's small face. Next to her was Kai, who looked even more grim-faced than usual.
"He got them."
Logan's voice was rich with relief. "I'm going to meet the boat," I said, handing him the binoculars. I was already turning to run for the stairs. Logan took a few steps behind me, but he was still limping from his fight with Arthur. He fell behind me as I sprinted across the rooftop. He wasn't going to be able to keep up with me. There was time before the boat docked. I whirled and ran back to hug him one more time. As he caught me around the waist, his lips parted in a grin that brightened his rough-hewn, handsome face. No matter how wounded he might be, he still scooped me up against his chest until my toes lifted off the floor. He buried his face in my hair.
"And how did I earn that hug?"
I'd never forget that even though Logan loved Arthur like a brother, he fought Arthur over my independence. He'd fought for my right to return to my first pack, the Northern Wolves who'd saved me. Logan wanted me to stay, but he'd fought for my right to leave. I hoped I wouldn't leave any of them behind. The guys were skeptical, but I believed I could build a bridge between my first pack and Logan, Arthur, Sebastian, and Finn, my Atlantic pack, the ones who had won my heart so unexpectedly. "Thank you for being willing to fight for me," I whispered.
"Always,"
he whispered back. When he looked at me, his fierce eyes softened. Even if he never said a word, I'd have known how much he loved me when he looked at me like that. He carried me toward the stairs. He was favoring one leg, and it made us sway to one side. "You don't have to carry me," I said. "You're broken. I should probably be carrying you."
"Broken?"
Dark eyebrows rose over vivid blue eyes.
"I'll never be too broken to carry a tiny girl like you."
I prefer petite to tiny, but I wasn't going to argue with him. "I'm stronger than I look," I promised.
"I know,"
he said.
"I depend on you. You're the strongest person I know, Piper Sullivan."
His words melted my heart. I leaned forward and brushed my lips against his. His lips curved in a smile that I felt against my own mouth. As he set me down on my feet by the door to the stairs, he leaned forward to keep kissing me, even though it meant bending at his waist. Wild to finish our kiss, I caught the side of his face with my palm, and his hands settled on my waist. His lips were soft and warm against mine. I never would have guessed from his cocky, dangerous personality how tender he could be. He pulled away from me reluctantly, straightening to his full height, and towering over me once again.
"But strong as you are,"
he teased, taking the end of my blonde ponytail from where it had hung over my shoulder and tugging on it gently.
"you never have to be strong on your own ever again. In fact, I'm sure Arthur won't allow alone."
"I don't particularly want to be alone anymore," I said, and then realized it was true. A few short months before, my dream had been to escape with Maddie to a life where I never had to depend on anyone. I'd thought then that the world was a cruel, lonely place. Maybe the world was a cruel place, but I wasn't alone in it, and I never would be again. I wasn't a helpless baby like I had been when the Coven first came for me, and I wouldn't let them destroy my life a second time. I brushed my lips over his stubbled cheek in a quick goodbye kiss, and then whirled to run down the stairs.
"Find Seb at the boathouse," he called. "Don't go anywhere on your own. I'm right behind you."
I clattered down all 3 flights of stairs and ran across the front porch, taking a flying leap onto the grassy yard. My sister was safe. Kai was safe. The rest of my pack had been scattered by the Coven's attack, and my mind was a constant, restless, wordless prayer for their safety to whatever gods existed. But in this moment, my heart hummed with the promise of being reunited with my sister. I couldn't wait to hug her tight, and I couldn't wait to see Kai and finally put our fights behind us. The trip down the sandy path was a blur. I reached the boathouse, a long white building surrounded by damp wooden docks, with the deep blue ocean just beyond. Seb was helping a mother carrying an infant into a boat packed full of cubs and a scattering of parents. He heard my footsteps and turned. When he saw me, his face brightened, although he didn't smile.
"They're taking them around to the cove,"
he muttered, careful to keep his voice low.
"To keep them safe."
"Arthur's on his way back," I said, "with Maddie and Kai." Seb grinned in relief.
"Oh, good."
He didn't know my sister or Kai, and it touched my heart that he cared so much about them for my sake. His hand skimmed my back protectively as he glanced behind me.
"Where's Logan?"
Knowing that Logan would be irritated if he heard me, I said, "He's slow right now. He's on his way."
"Sebastian."
The shifter male on the other side of the dock was familiar, but I didn't remember his name. He was tall and lean, young but bearded.
"Come on. Let's go." "I've got to stay here."
Seb's hand slid across my lower back, and he looked into my face as if he were making a decision. He was still looking at me as he spoke to the other shifter.
"Piper is important to the Coven. She can't be alone. You go on, John. We got our orders."
John snapped impatiently, pacing across the wet dock in a few quick strides.
"We're to stay with the cubs to protect them." "Orders change,"
Seb said, finally looking at John, who glowered at him. With visible effort, Seb raised his eyes to stare into the angry gaze of the higher-ranking shifter.
"Arthur would order us not to leave her alone. You can go. I'll follow later."
John leaned in toward him, his voice a snarl.
"Now. We're wasting time." "You're wasting time."
Seb's voice was soft but threaded with steel. He sounded more like his half-brother Arthur than I had ever heard him before.
"Are you defying me?"
John demanded. "It's all right." I stepped between the two of them, trying to calm the situation, and offered Seb a smile. Seb's jaw was set, his eyes furious, but the tension in his frame was shaky. It was as if he was struggling to keep from bowing his shoulders and turning away. He'd been kicked around at the bottom of the pack for years. I didn't want him to suffer for me. "Logan told me to find Seb, and that Seb would stay with me until he got here," I told John. John's lips twisted.
"You don't belong here, Piper Sullivan. You belong to that witch, not to our pack."
His words were like a slap.
"Don't speak to her that way."
Seb's cheeks flushed with high color.
"Walk away, John, or I'll make you regret it." "You're threatening me now?"
John grinned, a fake grin, like he couldn't believe it. There was going to be bloodshed. Desperately, I tried to think of a way to calm the situation. I promised Seb, "I'll be fine. Go protect the cubs."
"No, Piper,"
he said, looking past me at John.
"My loyalty is to my pack and to you, not to anyone's foolish pride."
Those were fighting words. John snarled as he stepped forward. He grabbed my shoulder and shoved me out of his way. I caught myself, wobbling at the edge of the dock, as John headed towards Seb with fire in his eyes. Seb caught my arms to make sure I kept my balance. His grip was firm and warm and comforting. He gave me a nod and a smile like he wasn't afraid of a fight. When John grabbed for him, Seb turned away from me and ducked low. Seb drove his fist into John's side as John wrapped his arms around him. It was hard to tell which one of them threw the other, but they slammed into the ground hard. John almost pinned him, but Seb rolled away. In an instant, they had both bounded up to their feet. "The cubs, remember?" I asked John urgently. "You were getting them to safety?" Seb put his hands up as if he were holding John off.
"Yeah, that's the top priority. We can sort this out later. You don't like being an Omega anymore?"
John taunted.
"You picked a hell of a time to try to raise your status." "Just go,"
Seb said.
"Stop telling me what to do!"
John roared. He pitched himself forward, catching Seb around the waist. The two of them slammed into the deck. Seb's head hit the wood hard, and I winced at the crack. I wished I could help him. According to the way the Pax lived, he had to fight on his own for his status. If I waded in there to try to help, I'd only make things worse. The boatload of cubs was watching them, wide-eyed. As John and Seb fought, they rolled across the damp dock. "Look out!" I shouted, too late, right before John caught Seb across the face with a fist. Seb bucked, rolling him over. John rolled against the very edge of the dock. His face twisted in horror as he realized he was falling. He grabbed Seb's shoulders, dragging him along too. The two of them rolled into the water with a splash. "Oh, good grief," one of the mothers in the boat muttered. "Send over whichever one of them can still walk later." She cast off the line and pushed away from the dock with her foot. She steered the boat out of the slip and into the sunshine outside the boathouse, where the sun glittered on the water. Seb and John surfaced, gasping in quick breaths as they glowered at each other. Then John threw himself at Seb again, and the two of them sunk back under the water. I chewed my thumbnail as I waited. I breathed in Logan's familiar, clean scent a second before I felt his warm presence. He stopped at my side, and when he looked after the boat sailing away, his jaw set. His voice was heated when he asked,
"Did Seb leave you behind?"
"No," I started. Seb and John heaved out of the water, still struggling with their arms locked around each other. Seb got an arm loose and punched John across the face. John's head jerked back, and Seb responded with two more quick, powerful punches.
"Knock it off,"
Logan shouted. He bounded across the dock to kneel at the edge, gesturing them in.
"Get in here."
John started to sink under the waves, and Seb hurried to grab him under the arms.
"I think he's knocked out." "Holy shit, Seb,"
Logan said.
"You picked today to start something?" "Sorry," Seb muttered. "You two couldn't have worse timing." Logan continued to lecture him, but he held his hand out, bending low on the dock so that Seb could swim John over. "This is no time for the two of you to fight. We all need to be focused."
"It wasn't his fault," I defended Seb. "John told him to follow their original orders and go with them. Seb knew you'd want him to wait." Logan strained to heave John out of the water. John's clothes streamed water as Logan finally managed to wrestle him onto the dock. John came alive with a gasp, sitting up and trying to push Logan out of his way before he realized who it was. Then his eyes met Logan's and widened with understanding.
"Yeah,"
Logan said, giving his cheek a sharp pat that bordered on a slap.
"That's right. You two knuckleheads can let this go now, you hear me?"
Instead of answering, John choked, leaning forward to cough, and Logan thumped his back as he glanced into the water.
"Well?"
Logan demanded of Seb.
"Are you enjoying your swim? Want to join the rest of us? We might be at war here."
Seb had to jump to catch the edge of the dock, his biceps straining as he heaved himself up. His wet t-shirt clung to his shoulders and his narrow waist.
"For the record,"
Logan said to John,
"Sebastian wasn't wrong." "He defied my orders,"
John said, his voice still raspy.
"He challenged me. Well, you defied common sense. Let's all survive today, and then the two of you can fight it out."
Logan clapped John's shoulder and stood.
"You, Get Maddock and go after the cubs. I need Seb with me." "Got it."
John pressed the back of his hand to a bleeding cut in his lip as he headed up the trail. Once John had gone, Logan let himself smile. He smacked Seb's shoulders with one big hand.
"You're not—"
Seb trailed off.
"Your timing sucks,"
Logan said.
"But I'm glad you're finally stepping up." "It was never my idea to be an Omega,"
Seb protested.
"You never fought it either,"
Logan said.
"Arthur and I have been waiting, but we can't do it for you."
I'd wondered why, even though Arthur and Logan led the pack, their twin half-brothers were at the bottom. Given how Logan and Arthur had acted when I first came here, I'd thought they just didn't give a damn. Now I felt chagrined. I'd misread them. Any attempt to help their little brother's rise would have been perceived as favoritism by the pack. Seb and Finn would never be taken seriously unless they fought for their own place. Now that Seb had begun, Logan's delight in his brother was written across his face. Logan smacked Seb's back again.
"Surprised the hell out of him, didn't you?" "Apparently,"
Seb said. He ducked his head, hiding the faintest grin himself. He was so cute. It made me want to kiss him.
"Hopefully, we're going to have to chase those witches down, not have them come to us."
Logan glanced across the waves at Arthur's boat, and then at the horizon beyond. The wind rustled his hair above his handsome face.
"But if there is a fight coming our way, I'm sure you'll prove yourself, Seb."
The thought was instantly sobering. If trouble was coming our way, it was because of me. I chewed my lower lip, looking out at the bright blue waves. It was a cold day, but the sun was shining, almost blindingly bright, as it reflected from the waves. "Do you wish I'd never come here?" I asked.
"Hell no, Piper."
Logan's hands spanned my hips, spinning me toward him, and I stared up into his face in surprise. I could tell he meant it when he told me,
"You're what we all needed, what I need. I don't mind doing some killing to keep you safe with me."
I had to smile at that. Spoken like a true werewolf with a bit of bloodlust.
"Oh, it's not just bloodlust,"
he told me. He slid one finger under my chin to tilt my mouth up to his. No matter what was coming our way, the world stilled when Logan kissed me. Chapter 2. As Arthur's boat pulled into the dock, I took an impatient step forward, straining to see my sister. Logan settled his arm around my waist, drawing me against his body as if he were holding me back. His nostrils flared as he teased out the scents on the air. After he nodded, Seb reached out to catch the line that Arthur threw his way. Had Logan been afraid that Arthur would come back under the influence of the Coven? As soon as the engine cut off and the boat ran up against the plastic bumper hanging over the edge of the slip, Arthur jumped off. The dock reverberated under his feet. Arthur turned back to help Maddie onto the dock, but she hesitated, staring at him. Her face was pale and blotchy, her long blonde hair tangled around her shoulders. She looked so scared, and all I wanted was to wrap my arms around her and make her feel better. It took me a second to remember he was 6'6" of terrifying alpha male. I'd come to see him differently during my time on his island, but it was understandable that she might be wary of Arthur.
"It's all right,"
Kai said. His voice was gruff and familiar, and it sent a throb of emotion through me. I looked past Maddie for him, eager to see his face. Kai avoided my gaze as he rested his hand on Maddie's shoulders.
"He's going to take you to see your sister."
She hung back, almost stepping back into his arms.
"Maddie,"
he said, his voice frustrated and kind at the same time, as if she had already pushed him to the edge of exasperation.
"Come on. We have to get off the boat. You're going to be safe here."
Reluctantly, she stepped to the edge of the boat. Kai steadied her as Arthur leaned out to catch her around the waist, and he lifted her easily down to the dock. He set her down between us. She looked at me, her pixie face unsmiling. I felt my grin flicker and die, but I still leaned forward and pulled her into my arms. I hugged her, but her arms hung at her sides. "What's wrong?" I demanded, kneeling in front of her so I could get a better look at her face. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer me. She glanced away, staring somewhere over my shoulder so fixedly that I almost turned to see what the hell she was looking at. Kai jumped from the boat to the dock.
"She's had a long day. And it's not over yet,"
Arthur said, because he was so helpful like that.
"The Shenandoah pack called. They were hit too."
"Did you hear anything else from Callum or any of the others?" I asked eagerly, straightening up. Maddie brushed past me as if she was glad I'd let go of her. When she reached the sandy bank, she stopped. Her little face was still so set and angry. I knew she couldn't stand for me to be away. She always had that fear of being abandoned, but I thought she'd understand. I'd even talked to her on the phone a few times. I'd been desperate to hear her voice, and she'd chattered easily enough at the time. What the hell had happened? Arthur shook his head.
"Callum knows where to find us. He'll make his way here if he can." "What about the Shenandoah pack?" Logan asked. "Did they take a lot of injuries?" "Yeah,"
Arthur said grimly. He ran his hand through his hair and heaved a sigh.
"I told them they could come here." "I see,"
Logan said, with zero inflection. Back when I was born and the Coven destroyed my pack, the Atlantic pack had left us all to suffer instead of helping. Now Arthur was taking a risk. He was trying to help another pack, even though it meant bringing them to his sacred pack land. His decision would mean something to Callum, who still simmered with rage over being abandoned. Arthur was choosing to be different from the previous alphas and to extend a hand to the other packs. It could change everything.
"If the Coven attacks us here, we'll make them regret it,"
Arthur said.
"We have fortified positions, machine guns. They'll have to approach on boats. It will leave them vulnerable."
We would need for them to be vulnerable to have a fighting chance against witches' magic. Arthur and Logan, already engrossed in the discussion of what preparations had been made and what still had to be done, moved quickly toward the house ahead of us. Seb hesitated, as if he was still watching over me. "Come on, Maddie," I said. She flashed me a dirty look and reluctantly trudged toward the house with me. I glanced back at Kai, who stood on the dock as if he was rooted there, his arms crossed over his chest. There was an expression on his face that was hard for me to read. His stance telegraphed irritation. But Kai covered a lot of other emotions with irritation. And no matter how cold his posture, his gaze as he watched me was filled with regret. "Kai," I said. I'd meant to be offhanded and light-hearted. "Kai, are you coming?" But instead, my voice broke. I frowned, unable to ask the rest of my question. Traitorous voice. His eyes widened. He was at my side in a few quick strides. He looked into my face as if he wanted to say something, but instead, he swallowed. Maddie slipped between the two of us, taking his hand in hers. He glanced down at her and managed to smile, although his eyes were still troubled.
"Let's get to the house."
There was an edge of heat in Seb's voice. He glanced from us to the horizon, and his voice was cool and controlled again, as he looked at Kai and added,
"We've got to make sure the girls are safe. Always."
Kai's gaze returned to mine. No matter how he felt about me right now, he said always like he meant it with all his heart. It gave me a swell of hope. Seb trekked resolutely around us and up the sandy path. Feeling a sense of dread, like something terrible was coming our way, I headed up the hill behind him. Kai and Maddie were at my side, but no one held my hand. My sister and at least one member of my pack had come back to me, yet I felt more alone than I had in a long time. Chapter 3. I'd never been in the war room before. The first day I came here, Logan had led me past this space, filled with screens and tables and a handful of people working. When I glanced in, someone had gotten up and closed the door. It had been a reminder that I did not belong here, that I was neither trusted nor wanted. That hadn't been so long ago. But now, the room was a lot more crowded. One of the men looked at me as if they wanted to say something, but Logan's gaze met theirs first. Their eyes dropped to the terrain table, which held a miniaturized version of the island rendered in sand and clay. On a big screen television, there was a map of the island, and radios buzzed. At the back of the room, doors stood open to another room that was filled with rows of picked-over weapons, flat black metal barrels and stocks, bright silver swords, and empty spaces between. Most of the shifters were heavily armed now with everything from knives to rifles. Inzel came to the door. Logan must have scented him, because his nostrils flared, and there was the faintest crinkle to his nose. He nodded to Inzel anyway. Maybe he and Arthur still planned to use Inzel's ruthless ambition. It was Arthur who went to the door.
"I'd like you to guard the barns in the west fields."
"The supply shields?"
Inzel's tone was offended.
"If they burn our livestock, it will be a real loss for our families,"
Arthur said firmly.
"Take a rifle and go."
Inzel gave him a long look, and Arthur met it with an expression of challenge. After all, Inzel hadn't challenged Arthur himself. He relied on Logan to do it. Inzel's gaze fell to the floor, and he headed to the back of the room. His gaze rose just as he reached me, when his back was to Arthur and Logan, and he flashed me a look of pure hate. I met his gaze evenly, pretending that look didn't make my stomach twist. When Inzel was behind us in the armory, Seb murmured to me,
"You shouldn't be here." "She's staying with me,"
Arthur snapped, without looking back. He barely looked away from the conference he was having with Logan and a few of his lieutenants around the terrain table.
"I want to make sure she's safe."
Logan's jaw set. All of my guys wanted to make sure I was safe. "All right," I said, "but I want to get my little sister something to eat."
"Fine,"
Arthur said grudgingly. Maddie was still not talking to me, but I steered her out of the war room and Kai followed after us. Someone knocked into my shoulder, hard, as we were walking down the hall. As I spun to see who it was, I tried to tamp down my annoyance. It was a bustling time in the house, as everyone rushed to prepare. Inzel walked past me, now that he had almost checked me into the wall.
"Watch it,"
Kai ground out before I could say anything myself. Inzel stopped and turned around, but took another step back, as if he were too busy to pause. With a smirk spreading across his face, he raised his hands as if to say it didn't matter. "What's your problem?" I asked a second too late, just as he was beginning to turn back around. I didn't actually care what his problem was with me. I could imagine his problem just fine. But right now, he seemed to feel he could show his disdain of me openly. Why? What was he up to?
"No problem, princess,"
he said, his face blank. Kai stared him down. Inzel turned on his heel to go, and it surprised me. He didn't seem like the type to let it go if he thought another wolf was disrespecting him. Then he turned right back on around. I knew it.
"Best watch yourself,"
Inzel told Kai.
"You're not on your own territory."
"From what I hear, neither are you," I said lightly, as I stepped between Kai and Inzel. Inzel wanted to fight with Kai and ignore me. As a female, I was irrelevant to his old-school misogynist view of the world. I intended to wake him up. Inzel bared his teeth.
"What do you mean, girl?"
I smiled back at him. "I think you know exactly what I mean." As he stepped in toward me, he narrowed his eyes dangerously. Kai was right there, stepping in front of me.
"Inzel?"
Arthur's voice was a whip crack down the hallway.
"You're needed at the barns."
I waggled my fingers goodbye to Inzel. He nodded to Arthur and walked away, although the set of his posture was rebellious.
"Piper,"
Arthur said, and his voice was entirely different. Soft, affectionate, exasperated. I turned and smiled at him, too. "Arthur, look, we all know each other's names." He heaved a dramatic sigh. I put my hand on Maddie's shoulder and steered her ahead of me down the hall to the kitchen. The kitchen was empty for once. This house had a commercial kitchen, all stainless steel and big appliances, and it made me uncomfortable. It wasn't like the kitchen back at the Blissford house, where we all gathered for cozy meals and banter. I felt unwelcome here. "Are you hungry?" I asked Maddie brightly.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?